Hello and welcome to episode 20 of No Time to Cry. We're back in my house with a familiar face from a previous episode that was filmed in mine. So, we're your hosts. I'm Shannon.
And I'm Paula.
Do you know what? I even expected to hear Laura then, like in my
In
head,
your
I was
head, and then
expecting.
it's my husky voice.
Yeah, Paula's not well, and Laura's on holiday. I was going to say sunning herself up, but our little Laura doesn't really catch the sun very well.
She'll be trying.
She'll be trying her best with 2 kids in tow.
I know.
I
I
don't
don't know how
envy
she's
her.
doing that.
She may well need this episode when we come back
Yeah,
even.
I think so.
So this week we wanted to talk about something that's super close to both mine and Paula's hearts. So we've mentioned about it before from my side. And the reason I wanted to bring Paula in on this episode is because she's recently, in sort of the last like 9 months, gone on a journey herself with therapy. And I have been doing therapy for, I
A
don't know, a
while.
long time, a good few years now. Well, at least, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4
Yeah, it
years.
must
Yeah,
be.
3 or 4 years. So we're huge advocates for therapy. I don't know if you've realized already. I've spoke about it quite a lot since doing these recordings, and it is just because it genuinely changed my life and continues to change my life. And if we can get more people feeling comfortable about what to expect,
Yeah.
what are the type of things that you talk about, there's loads of different types of therapy, by the way, so we can only really talk to the ones that
Yeah.
we've done. But I do think there is there's different things out there, different things for you to try, and something will work differently for everyone. So, yeah, I think, do you want to talk about a little bit about how long you've been in therapy, what type of therapy that you do, and then I can do the same?
Yeah, so I've been having therapy probably about 10 months now.
So, yeah.
So I have a therapy session every week and I have done for 10 months. So initially, I went into therapy more so because of my relationship and the breakdown of my marriage. So that was one of the main things why I went into therapy. But even before that, like we'd spoken about therapy quite a few times, and you said
Been trying to
you
get
need
her
to
in
go to
for.
therapy, it would really help. So I knew, even though that was going to be the start and kind of main focus to start with, I knew that that wasn't just the reason why I needed to go to therapy. There were lots of reasons more just about me and how I saw myself and how I approach different situations that I knew I needed to talk to someone about, because I knew that I just couldn't carry on the way that I was at that time, because I was just losing myself a little bit.
Yeah, you were a shell of yourself at the
Yeah.
time. And I think, unfortunately, for most people, and why I think it's so important for us to talk to therapy is I had to hit that point before I did it
Yeah.
as well. I didn't have many people, if any, that were doing therapy at the time that I got into it amongst my friends. Now, like most of my friends are, um, but I I think it's a shame for us to have to get to
Yeah.
that point before we all invest into ourselves and say, well, what can we do? So what type of therapy is yours? It's more just sort of talking through things.
Yeah, so she kind of feeds off what I say, and even things like my facial expressions. And if I say certain things, say 2 weeks before, and then I say them again, and she'll say, "Oh, you said that 2 weeks ago. Let's come back to that and let's talk
Mm,
about it." Because sometimes I will say a lot, and then she'll be like, "Right, okay, we need to go back and unpick all these different things to work out, well, how does that make you feel? Stop
yeah.
and think about how it makes you feel. What are you thinking at that time?" And a lot of mine was probably, well, not all of it, but anxieties. So having a lot of anxieties about, if I did something, people who even I probably didn't even really know, what would they think about me? Would they think I'm a bad person if I did that, or not nice, and all those kind of things? And she would kind of say, "Well, okay, say they did. What would that mean?" "Oh,
Mm,
that mean I'd feel bad. So you think you're a bad person, but you know you're not." So it's that keep
mm,
coming back to it, all the different things that you go over. So yeah, she kind of bounces off the things that I say, and then she'll kind of unpick it all for me and we'll talk about it.
Yeah. I think that the good thing about therapy as well is a lot of the time your therapist holds you accountable for
Yeah,
looking after yourself and
yeah,
what you say and do.
definitely.
When you look back, like, was there a pivotal moment where you kind of thought, I have to speak to somebody now?
Yeah, I think the day that I decided that I wasn't sure I could continue in the relationship that I was in, and on that day, I think the next day I straight away
Yeah, you
Googled
did.
therapists, looked for someone who I felt, when because when you go on, there's a website that you can go on. I need to remember what the website is, but there is a website you can go on and they'll leave like a little kind of to tell them about themselves. And I got in contact, I think, with 2 different ones, but Jenny, who's my therapist, I just felt everything that she said clicked with me. So
Mm,
I had a phone call, and then I think the week after I had a session booked straight away. So I think when that happened, I just thought, "No, I can't, I need to speak to someone," because it
mm,
isn't just about the breakdown of that relationship, it's everything else that comes with it about myself
yeah,
that I know that I needed to get support with.
yeah. And it is quite confronting when you get to
Yeah,
that point.
it is.
Like, I don't want to kind of sugarcoat anything. Like, therapy is the hardest but best thing
Yeah.
I have ever
I
done.
agree.
And I do think it's harder at the beginning because you've got years and years and years of pent
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
just
I
everything
know.
like going on. Whereas now, my therapist knows probably more about me than
Yeah.
anybody, especially as I've been working with her for years. And it's easier to talk because she also knows a lot about the people in my life because she's heard continuous stories about them and experiences with them and all things like that. And it does make it a lot easier. But I get why people think the idea or find the idea of therapy overwhelming
Yeah.
is that first initial, ugh. But I have to say, and I don't know if you felt the same, that first phone call you speak for, well, whatever means I do mine over a video call. Do you do yours the
Yeah,
same?
mine's the same.
Some people do it in person or whatever. It's whatever works for you. For me, I my preference was to do a video call. I just was in such a bad way. I don't think I would have got myself anywhere
No.
in terms of like turning up and going have to. I think the anxiety of that
Yeah.
probably would have taken over for me. And my therapist does offer, I think, face to face. I know
Yeah.
she does face to face sessions, but for me, it's just always been my preference, and it's easier, and I can fit it in a lot
Yeah.
easier, and I can do it a lot more
Yeah.
regularly. But there was such a weight lifted. That session, you talk for 90% of it because they basically say to you, "Why are you
Yeah.
here? Why do you think you need support? Why have you come to therapy or why have you come to a counselor?" And it all just kind of goes, woof, and
Yeah.
they know what
It's like
questions
word
to
vomit.
ask. But I felt a weight
Yeah.
lifted off my
I did.
shoulders. So although it was overwhelming and a bit scary beforehand, once you've actually done that, I just thought, "Oh my god, I've got so much out." And they do such a good job of just validating your
Yeah.
feelings and saying, "Well, no wonder you feel
Yeah.
like that. No wonder you feel anxious. No wonder you feel scared. No wonder you feel sad because this, and this." And
Yeah.
sometimes hearing that back from a professional, I think,
Yeah.
is where I kind of get um a little bit, somebody that is professionally going, "I think it's okay for you to feel
Yeah.
like this. You're going through a really hard
Tough time.
time." Because I think we're quite bad at times for sort of, I know I am. I think you, Laura, and I are all very similar where we sort of go, "Oh, well, it's fine. It's not that bad," and play it down and
Yeah.
we'll be all right. "Oh, we don't moan about it. Just crack on. There's no reason to moan." When you then have someone going, "No, no, I think you
No, I
should
think you really
be."
should be.
I think you should have come about 6 months ago, if I'm honest, probably 10 years ago.
Yeah.
It just takes that weight away. How do you like, because I think some people, they don't instantly click with their therapist. And I think
No.
you and I were quite lucky that
Yeah.
the therapists that we found, we had that instant connection with. What is it about your therapist that you find easy to talk to them about?
I think it's that when you were saying that validation and she listens to me. So
Yeah,
one of my main things is I really struggled to feel listened to, which I found really hard. So I kind of just stopped speaking a little bit and just
yeah, you start
internalize things. And,
vocalizing.
I think Laura said it in the, I don't know if it was last week's podcast where she said it's like the swan at the top and the legs are going and you underneath. And it's kind of like that's just how I got used to doing it. And she mentioned about like the work that we all do. And I think maybe that maybe also plays a part in that we all have jobs where, you have to be a certain way and everyone to see you a certain
Yeah.
way, no matter what's going on, you've
Yeah,
got
you
to
mask
be.
a lot.
Yeah.
I think I was saying that I feel like I mask a lot at
Yeah.
work, and I'm a very different person at work to what I am at home. And I think you're probably
Yeah.
similar. We
Yeah.
mentioned on the episode you're on last time you're a primary school teacher. So, you can't, no matter what's going on, like for
No.
you,
I can't be
obviously.
crying in the middle of the classroom.
But that's it, isn't it? Like you're for yourself, like you've been quite open and said, like for you, that the kind of pivotal part was like a relationship breakdown. You can't have little kids kind of knowing
No.
the ins and outs of what's going on
Oh,
in
they'd
your
love to.
life.
They'd love to know everything, but no.
But it's not right for them to
No.
know your personal life and know you as anything other than
No.
Miss,
Yeah.
and their teacher and their comfort blanket. And I think that's really hard
Yeah.
because then there's this expectation that you have to be okay all the time. And some people would say actually it might be good for kids to see different emotions and understand that you can't be happy all the time
Yeah.
and things like that. But I think you'd have to put yourself in a real vulnerable
Yeah.
position to have to
Yeah.
explain that to very young children because the kids you look after are really young as
Yeah,
well,
they're
aren't
like
they?
5 to 7, so they're quite young.
And some of them would have never like won't know the ins and outs of different types of relationships and
Yeah.
things like that. So it's tricky. It's a tricky position to be in. And then I've always found, I think I mentioned it on the episode that Paula was on the last time. I always know if she's not sure on something because it takes a while to reply. And I know that she's fine trying to find the words to say, I don't really want to do that, or I'm not really
Yeah.
into that, or rather than just going to me, "Oh, fuck off,
No,
Shannon, I don't
yeah.
want to do that."
It's
Which
not for
I
me.
yeah, which, I'd have no problem with whatsoever if she said that to me because I am very much
Yeah.
straight down the line. So, but I think you pick up on people's sort of behaviors and actions and
Yeah, and I
things like
think
that.
I'd got into such a headspace that even though, we've known each other so long and I knew, and I say this to my therapist all the time, I know that my friends will be there for me no matter what, and my family, but for whatever reason, I still felt like, "Oh, well, she might not like that, and that might upset her." And I just got it myself into that headspace where
Yeah.
that's how I'd think
Do
and
you
how I'd
think it's a
feel.
guilt thing in terms of putting onto other people's
Yeah, I think
plate?
it probably is. I think and you're probably the same with your job and, sometimes even family. It's like, no, 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 like I went to university, I did all this, I'm doing all these things that people see that I should be doing. So I need to keep
Mm,
that going. I can't be seen to not quite do maybe what's expected of me.
mm,
So I'll just keep going, keep doing
yeah.
it no matter what. So then that's that when you're thinking about the swan on top mentality and the feet going underneath.
Mm.
And that's basically what was going on, even though I knew if I came to you and said, like you said, oh no, you wouldn't care. But in my head, I was thinking, oh no, I don't want to
Because I think
upset.
as as well, it took you a long time to kind of talk about some of the struggles that you were having,
Yeah,
like within your relationship. I don't think anybody expected it because it wasn't
no,
something you felt comfortable
no,
vocalizing. So that's like a big. Now we were talking the other day. We went for some dinner, and I said to her, like, even I feel like you've opened up so
yeah,
much more. I've been a best friend for
I
like
know.
9 years, and in the last 9 months, she's probably opened up to me more than she's
Yeah,
ever done like in that 9 year period. And I think it's you sort of learning from going to therapy and the experiences that you've
yeah,
had that it's like exactly like I said to you, if you open up, people feel more
Yeah.
comfortable to open up
Yeah.
to you as
Yeah.
well. And it doesn't have to be that every time you are going through a hard time, you are burdening your friends.
No.
I always say to my friends, I don't care if I'm going through the worst time
Yeah.
ever. I don't see your problems as a burden
No.
to me. I love you. I care about you. I want to be a
Yeah.
part of you feeling good, better, helping you along the
Yeah.
way, no matter what's going on in my
I
life.
know.
And, I can separate things quite well in my
Yeah.
head. I don't know if that's like just me or something that everybody can kind of do. Like if I'm going through a hard time, when I'm talking to my friends about their experiences and what they're doing, I don't feel like that adds to my
No. You can
load.
separate the two.
I can separate the two. And even, listen, I think when I was, obviously we talk about grief on here quite a lot. I think that was one of the only times where at times I found it hard to, I don't even think it was to separate it. I think it was just having the emotional capacity
Yeah.
to give more than what I kind of had in my locker. Which is why Laura and I spoke so clearly about
Yeah.
separating things. And that was advice from my therapist. She
Yeah.
said, you've got to be careful here.
Of course
Like,
you do.
you two could really end up triggering each other, and make sure that you're able to separate things, make sure that you're able to be there for each other without
Yeah, in a healthy way.
yeah, without it getting too much. What do you think's the biggest change about for yourself in the last sort of 10 months?
I think for me, it's being really open and honest. So, like, prior, I'd probably, if I was going through a tricky time or upset about something, whether it be work or just something small, I'd just keep it to myself and I wouldn't say anything. But then it'd get to the point, and I think Laura touched on this, where you just explode
Yeah.
because you're just like, I actually can't hold this in anymore. Whereas now, I feel like I'm a lot more open with everyone. And I said this to you the other night about even with my mum and dad, since, everything that's happened, I feel closer to them. And it's nothing they did as to why I wouldn't. We've always been really close. But I definitely feel like now I can be really open and honest. And even to the point where sometimes if they say something, I'll say, no, I don't want that, or
Yeah.
I don't agree with that, or that's not something that I feel or I want to do. And they'll just say, oh, no, that's fine. That's not what I meant. Whereas before, I probably wouldn't ever do that because I'd be like, let's just
Mm,
keep
everyone
everything,
happy.
everyone happy. Whereas it wouldn't have made them unhappy, me vocalizing or saying things. In my head, I thought it would be, but that's not the case. So therapy's definitely taught me to kind of know the difference between kind of an anxiety that you can take and, you know, that's what it is. Take it for what it is. It's an anxiety. You don't know how people are going to take it or feel or think.
Yeah, but you're not in control of
But
other
I'm not in
people.
control of that. And I think, going to therapy, that's what she said. That's what I was trying to do. I was trying to control everything to make everything, okay.
Mm,
Um, at the detriment of whether I was okay or not. And I thought, well, as long as everything else is okay, that's fine. So
yeah.
I think I've definitely taken being more open and now recognizing when, I feel a certain way and if it's an anxiety and what I do with that. Take
Mm,
my time. Like I said to her the other day, I said, I call it an in a monologue a little bit where I kind of talk to myself through things to
yeah.
work out, is it an anxiety or is it something I really need to think about and look at and then go from there?
Yeah, because I think it just gives you, like, I don't know what your therapist kind of says to you, but mine has given me sort of a lot of tips and tricks over the years to try and ground myself,
Yeah.
understand how I actually feel about things. Very similar to Paula. I used to say it all the time, I'm really anxious. I'm really anxious. I don't know why I'm anxious. Don't know why I'm anxious. And actually, it wasn't anxiety, it was other emotions that I wouldn't let myself sit in
Yeah.
to work out what they were. So then I had an overarching feeling of anxiety there because there was loads of stuff inside that I
Yeah.
just wasn't addressing. I didn't want to have a think about, how do I really feel about that? Do I
Yeah.
feel angry about it? Do I feel sad?
Yeah.
Is it okay for me to feel angry? Is that my flight or fight kicking in? What
Yeah.
is it? So I just had this overarching constant buzz of like, ooh,
Yeah.
angst about me. Um, because I just wasn't willing to, I don't think I knew how, to be honest. I don't think I'd
No.
ever found what that knew what that was in terms of sitting with it, feeling it. I've always,
And it's so hard to sit and feel your
yeah, it is. Like,
feelings.
I'm not gonna wrap, like, it is hard, but it's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned
Yeah.
from therapy, of the importance of sitting with things and giving your time, yourself time to digest how you're feeling, and understanding sometimes it's okay to feel those feelings and think. And I've got a habit of um sort of logically thinking about things rather than feeling them,
Yeah.
where I go, I think I should feel like that, or I think I should feel like that. But
Yeah.
actually, how am I
Do
really
you actually
feeling?
feel?
Yeah. And rather than trying to talk myself out of the situation, this is something I'm kind of come into terms of a bit more recently. It's like, what does that look like for me? And sometimes my therapist will pull me up and say, you keep saying you think this, you think that. How do you feel
Yeah.
right now? How do you feel when you talk
Don't you
about
love it
that?
when they do that and they pick
Oh,
on
yeah,
things?
they call you
They go,
out.
"Excuse me, you've just said this. Can we look at that?" "No, thanks."
Uh, no, but do you know what's good with therapy? You're still in control.
Yeah,
If there is an area that you don't want to talk about, if I
you
said
just
to my
don't.
therapist, I don't want to talk about that today, she wouldn't make me talk about
No.
it. She would decide when's the right time, maybe to pick that back up, or when, maybe have a think about it in your own time,
Yeah,
see if you want to talk
yeah,
about it. I think the reason that therapy worked so well for myself is because I came as a complete open book.
yeah.
I didn't guard anything. I addressed some
I
really
know.
awkward,
It all came out.
yeah, it did, but it's because I wanted the help, and I think you can only get that if you're gonna be brutally honest with yourself. And listen, they're gonna ask you some really tricky
Yeah,
questions. They're gonna ask you some really confronting things. I remember maybe my first or second session, she asked me a question about whether I, um felt like I had sort of like a superiority complex towards like my dad and my parents, in terms of how I,
I
like,
remember you
how
talking
I
about that.
feel, or things like that. And I said, well, I think I've lived a lot of my life, not just myself, but like my parents sort of going, "Oh, you want to do this or you want to do that,"
Yeah,
or, in the instance of my dad, I don't want to be an alcoholic. I don't want to do those things. So
yeah,
to not do those things, I have to be better in certain areas. And I went, "Well, yeah, I would suppose that maybe I do have that, because I've said to my whole life, I don't want to be
yeah,
like that. I don't want to have those thoughts and feelings. So to not, I feel like I have to better myself in certain ways to stop that from happening. And if I'm bettering myself on someone, then maybe I'm
yeah,
thinking that I have to be better than that person." So yeah, and that was like, she was like, "You've been very self-aware and honest there." But I think you
yeah,
have to do that
yeah,
when
you
you go
do.
into therapy. You have to be willing to sit down and go, yeah, maybe I do that, because I think there's a reason for it, and this
Yeah,
is the reason. And actually, I think it's a protection piece.
yeah,
It's me trying to look after myself, and me trying to, address why maybe I've been so grown up for so
yeah,
long, and, being more of a parental figure, like to a parent, what that does to you, and how you've got to kind of, lead your life. But I went into therapy before my dad passed away. And I do think that that really helped me, because I think for a lot of people, when they lose a loved one, going into therapy straight after it can be quite raw.
yeah,
And you might feel like it's too soon to talk after you've lost that person. Whereas I already had a therapist. So it was really easy for me to reach out to her. She was probably one of the
yeah.
sort of like, after friends and family, like she was the first person
Yeah,
I
I mean, she knew what,
messaged.
like, prior, didn't she, of things that had gone on, so
Of
you didn't have to go
course.
back over that as
No,
well.
I didn't have to talk through old ground. I didn't have to talk through my relationship with my dad. I didn't have to talk through any of those things, because she already knew it all, and she already knew exactly how I was going to be feeling. And I've gone through different periods of my therapy. So to begin with, I did weekly, then I went to every 2 weeks, then I went to once a month. Then, at some point my therapist said, actually think just reach out to me when you need me.
Yeah.
I don't think you need every month or anything like that at the moment. And I was like, oh my God, have I completed
I know.
therapy? Like, have I
Have I done
completed it? Have I
it?
done it? Um, and then I would sort of reach out. And I remember maybe it had been a couple of months when my dad passed away. And I texted her obviously that day, and then I did a session, I think maybe a week or so after, which bless her, she didn't even charge me for. She was like, I refuse to charge for this. I just want to make sure you're
You're okay.
okay. Um, and then I did one the week of my dad's funeral, and then I think I genuinely went about 6 months.
Yeah.
And she said so much to me sort of on the lead, like after my dad had passed away, that I took and just sat with. And I literally tell anybody that's grieving or going through a hard time now these exact words that she said to me. And I may have even said this on another episode, but she said, grief is like standing with a bucket of water in front of you with your arms stretched. The longer you hold it,
Yeah.
the heavier it will feel. You've got to do the big, ugly cries where you
Yeah.
tip some of that water out so it feels
Feels
lighter.
lighter.
Otherwise, you'll collapse with it. And you've got to do, because I think I was sort of going, I don't want to cry anymore.
Yeah.
I've cried so much. I'm sick of crying. I'm sick of being upset. And she was like, I'm sorry, but
You need to.
you've you've got to.
Yeah.
Like, you can't skip grief. You
No.
can't say, I'm not going to do that part. I don't
No.
want to do that. Y-
No.
You can, but it will come back out. It doesn't
Yeah.
get rid of it.
No.
Um and you'll have to address it again in the future if you don't look after yourself. So yeah, I think she said some really like poignant things to me at that time. And then I needed 6 months, I suppose, just to kind of sit in my
Yeah.
grief. I really did sit in it as well, if I'm honest. And I think that's only because I learned how to sit with my emotions and things
Yeah.
from prior experience of doing therapy and sitting with some of those really big feelings. And when I came back to her, I was just starting a new job. I'd sort of returned, I mentioned before, I returned to work, quit, you know, got a new job, and was starting there. And she just said, like, bloody hell, I've wanted to, obviously you've got to have boundaries as a therapist. She was like, I really wanted to message you
Yeah.
and
To know how
see
you
that
were.
knew you were okay. I'm really glad that you've reached out. And I said, I feel like I'm ready to talk now. Like,
Yeah.
I've sat with it. I've gone through that first section of grief where I needed to come to terms with
Yeah.
it, come to terms with the fact that my dad had died, got over the shock of it to actually start grieving. And then I wanted to make sure that I was dealing with it in a way that was going to be mentally, I was looking after
Yeah.
myself. I wanted to make sure I was doing grief in a way that wasn't damaging to me. I'd kind of done 6 months of dealing with it how I felt I needed to deal with it. And then I was ready to go, okay, I think I'm ready to address
Certain
anything
things.
that I might not have done,
Yeah.
in the way that I should
Yeah.
have, or I'm ready to have that conversation. I'm ready to kind of go into the next steps of what my journey of therapy looks like. And then I kind of did it in and out. And then like the back end of last year, I was just going through a bit of a stressful time. I was really busy at work, and I have a habit of just running until I hit a brick
Yeah.
wall, like physically, like fucking woof,
I know.
straight into it. And that's something I'm working on in therapy at the moment, is recognizing. I recognize when I'm doing it. What I find difficult is to put the brakes on
Yeah.
and say, before it gets too much, stop. It's almost like I recognize it and then I go, I can do this
Do
though,
that
because
anyway.
I can
Yeah.
do I can get through this. I've
Yeah.
got through so much. Just keep going, just keep going. It's like in like Dory, she's like, just keep
Swimming,
swimming, just
just
keep
keep
swimming,
swimming.
just keep that's me. And I was recognizing it in myself, and I was getting very sort of that typical I mentioned last week, that discussion between me and my therapist on whether it's ADHD or PTSD, but I was very much in that
Yeah.
and I spoke to some of my friends about it, which is not something that I usually do. I normally talk afterwards, but I was like frantic.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel I'm up here and I can't get back down. And I'm just going, going, and going. And I had a conversation with her, and my therapist always says this to me: "You always come to me when you know what you need to do,
Yeah.
like, you're just coming for reassurance, like, you know what you need to do, you know you need to
Yeah.
address that, you know you need to do to this." And I go, "Yeah, I do."
Yeah, I do.
"Yeah, you're right, I do." So now I'm doing every 2 weeks,
It's good.
and I'm keeping up with it
Yeah.
because I think for me, that's I've recognized that actually when I leave it months and months and months, there's a lot that passes me by
Yeah.
that I don't talk about. And
Yeah.
if I was speaking to my therapist
You
every
would
week or
have.
every other 2 weeks, I
Yeah.
would speak about it and I would deal with it a lot better and I would continue to just monitor how things make me feel. Do you think you'll do it weekly forever?
If you ask me now, yeah.
Mm.
Whether in a couple of years' time I will, but I think for me, and I've said this to her before, that I feel like when I feel better, that's the time to continue because you never
Yeah.
know what's going to happen and you know that you're getting a positive impact out of it. So you kind of think if it was anything else, like the gym, for example, if you was getting positive things out of it and you felt better, would you stop it?
Yeah,
No,
that's
you
so
wouldn't.
true. I think people think about their physical health in such like a different way to their mental, but
Yeah.
actually we should be treating it the
Yeah.
same. Like if you want to feel good in your physical health, you go to the gym every few days, you
Yeah.
keep it up, and when you stop, you kind of, you might go back to old eating habits, you might not train as much, you might not feel as good, you might get out of breath going up the
Yeah.
stairs, and you feel that physical burden of not looking after yourself. And actually, you're right.
Yeah.
When you feel better, why would you stop?
Because then it's like you'll then go back to it and then realize all the really amazing things as to why going the gym, doing exercise, eating well, why it makes you feel good. So I had that conversation with my therapist and she says to me like, "Do you want another session?" And I'm like, "Yeah, because it's making me mentally feel better and I'm using the things that you're telling me day to day all the time with all the things that keep popping up.
Yeah.
I'm using it all the time and getting a positive impact out of it." Or it could even be that I've sat and had a cry, whereas
Mm.
usually I'd be like, "No, come on, it's
Yeah,
fine."
you've cried enough now. Crack
Yeah,
on. You've had
where
your 5
actually, no,
minutes.
no, no, I actually just had to sit and have a cry. So I'm getting, as hard as that may be, a positive thing out of it. So why would I want to stop doing that? I don't want to stop doing that.
Yeah, I think that's such a healthy way to look at it. And I think I've said this a few times on the podcast, we are privileged enough to be in a position that we're able to pay to go
Yeah,
privately to do that. Um, but it's the best investment I've ever made, like I think some of the things that I spend money on that I could
yeah,
stop tomorrow. I'd rather give up like sweets and chocolate
yeah,
and
then
all
give up
things like
therapy.
that than give up therapy and
100%.
invest my money into it because it's an investment into yourself. It's helped me in my work life, it's helped me in my home life, it's helped me with my personal relationship with myself, how I think and care about myself. Just in general, I think everybody would benefit from it. And I understand for some people, they may never get to a point where they want to do therapy, and that's fine. I think you have to deal with it in your own way. But I think it's important for people like ourselves to consistently talk about the positive impact that it's had because I've never felt any sort of like shame in saying that
No.
I go to therapy and I do therapy. I tell pretty much anyone I come into interaction with because I just feel like if I can say it with a like a positive demeanor and talk about it so positively, if one person hears that and goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, do you know what? Shannon does therapy
Yeah.
actually, and she seems like she's relatively normal. She's not like, because I think unfortunately, like therapy is for people like there's a assumption that it's for people that are in
Yeah, there's
constantly
just a
at
big
in
stigma around it,
despair.
isn't it? As if, oh, as if people are gonna, oh, you're in therapy, you okay? And it's
Okay.
like, I'm great because I go to therapy and it's the best
Yeah.
thing I've ever done. So actually, it's
Yeah,
amazing.
I never feel as good as when I'm regularly in therapy. As
No.
someone that's dipped
Yeah.
in and out and had like months off and stuff like that. Like when I feel my best is when I'm regularly talking to
Yeah.
my therapist and just addressing thoughts and feelings. And sometimes it's talking about stuff from years ago and sometimes it's talking about stuff right now.
Yeah.
I think just because you go into one therapy session and you talk about something that's gone on, when you were younger or a big deal, that next week, if I'm having a really hard time at work, I'm going to talk about what's
Yeah.
going on at work because that's what I need to address at that time. I've got years to talk about what's gone on in my
Yeah.
childhood and my adulthood and all those sort of things. I think you just have to address in that moment what is the prominent thing for
Yeah.
you. And if you're going to consistently carry on with therapy, you've got time to unpick stuff. There's no timeline on it either. Like, I think there's like, describe therapy very similar to grief. It's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Like,
It is.
it just really depends on your headspace. I mean, I feel like as a female, your hormonal cycle as well. Like, no, but
Yeah, it's true.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because something that one week would bother me
Yeah.
might not the
Not
week
that it, yeah,
after. I might be
definitely.
more sensitive to things. And then I might talk about something in therapy, and then the next week it might not even be something that I'm particularly
Yeah.
bothered about
Yeah.
or, feel like I need to talk about. But it was important for me to do it that week. So
Yeah.
that's what I discussed. And I think every therapy session that I have at the moment, certainly, there's kind of a different topic. Depends where I'm at, what's going on that week. Where, obviously I'm selling a house, I've got a lot going on at work, I'm still grieving my dad, I'm doing a podcast,
Yeah.
I'm planning a wedding.
Just
So
some small,
just
tiny
some really
things.
small things. So for me, kind of each week there always feels like there's something going on. And I feel like that's super important to say, like, I lost my dad 2 years ago. I don't talk about my dad every therapy session that
Yeah.
I do. I talk about my dad and my grief when I feel like I'm really struggling with it. And realistically, I feel grief for my dad every single day, but it does have it rears its head at
Yeah.
sometimes. And that's where I feel like it benefits me talking about it, but it also helps me kind of continuously deal with w- how does grief change for me in the next few years? What does it look like? How do I manage it personally? How do I keep on top of looking after myself and not letting it put to the back of my brain and not addressing it? And I do think
Yeah.
there is a space for ignoring things at times when that's what you have to do to get through that
Yeah.
particular day or that particular week. But I don't really believe in ignoring it long term
No.
and pretending it didn't happen. I think if you've got to pretend for a day to get through a day or 2 days or
Yeah,
a
then
week
that's
or even a
okay.
couple of months, okay, sometimes that's what we've got to do, but you have got to you've got to address it at some point. And if you don't, listen, I think you're probably one of the strongest people that I know. No,
Thanks.
you are. And I think
Right back at you.
for a long time, you thought that you were capable of just dealing with things
Yeah.
for yourself, and I think that's your ego. I think your ego goes, "Well, I can do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I can do that. I've done it before." And it's like, "But did you? Or did you bury your head in the sand
Probably.
and, push it aside, ignore it and go, "Oh god, thank god I've got through that."
Yeah.
And in the back of your head there's these little like seeds growing of
Oh,
all these
definitely.
different reasons why you are the way you are because you ignored all these things in the past and you let people decide things for
Yeah.
you and didn't say things when you wanted to say
Yeah.
them, all those
I think you just get
things.
on a hamster wheel, don't you? And you end up getting used to doing what you've always done. So you just go back to what you know. So you're like, well, I always did it that way. So I'll just deal with that the same way and keep going until unfortunately it gets to a point where you just go, no, I can't keep doing that because now I'm not who I want to be.
Yeah.
And that's then obviously what ended up happening with me and getting into therapy. And it's definitely been the best thing I've ever done.
And what would be your biggest, like, if you were going to recommend to people why they should do therapy, what would your
I
main points
think
be?
one, it's a no judgment zone. It's one of the places that I literally come home from work, have like an hour before I go to my session. She says, come in your pajamas, come with a glass of wine, come with a cup of whatever you, however you feel
Mm.
comfortable. You just sit and she goes, so how are you? And then you're just like, ah, and say it all. And like you said before, you get to the end of it and you're just like, oh, that felt so good to get it out. And sometimes, don't get me wrong, sometimes you'll come out and you'll go, God, that was hard. But I got through it and something positive came out of it. So I think it's definitely a place you can go and just be yourself
Yeah.
and get it all out there. And I don't know if you're, I'm assuming, and probably know your therapist is the same. They're so positive, they validate you, and they're just so positive about everything that you've overcome and what I've done that
Yeah.
you do come out feeling like, yeah,
I did it.
I
I'm
did
doing good.
that.
I'm
Look
doing
at
good, guys. I'm
me.
doing good. I think the other thing is, well, like, no two therapy sessions are the same. Like,
No,
sometimes I come off of a session and I'm in tears and I'm
yeah,
still crying and I'm
yeah,
gonna cry for another
yeah,
hour
it's
or
okay.
and I always do a bit of a debrief with Jamie after my sessions. We always have a bit of a conversation, and that's like hugely helped our relationship as well because it's made me be really open and it's taught him things about himself. And it's they call it like secondhand therapy. It's
Yeah,
like he gets secondhand therapy through the advice that I get with some of my emotions, and then he gets to do that himself and think about, well, oh, okay, maybe I do that actually. Do I do that? I think I don't really address things, or I think I don't really talk about stuff. And since I've been in therapy, I think our relationship has been the best it's ever been because it's allowed me to be more open with myself, but it's
yeah,
allowed us to have some really sort of frank conversations on the back of therapy sessions. But I'll be really honest um and say, like, in maybe the first month or so of me starting therapy, Jamie had a conversation with me where he was like, I don't know if this is good
good for
for
you.
you. You know, you're coming off and you're always in tears and you're always sad. And I said to him, I know that it looks that way, but I am addressing some really
It's like a
big,
purge, isn't it? It's like you're getting it
horrible.
out,
Yeah. And I said to him, I know it doesn't look it,
but it is.
but it makes me feel better.
Yeah,
And it's like it's healing old wounds. And sometimes it hurts, but it's addressing things. And then once that hurt is out, I feel better. And some of these emotions that are coming out are emotions that I have never addressed in
yeah,
the 20 odd years that I've been
yeah,
alive. And now I'm addressing them and they're really fucking
yeah,
scary. And some of the things that you kind of have to, like, I've had some huge revelations in therapy, huge, huge, huge revelations. And I think that they are not things that I necessarily would vocalize to
yeah,
everybody. Um, but they have changed my perspective and how I feel about myself, and they've made me be a bit kinder to myself as well.
yeah. I think as well for me, I think I've ended up addressing things that I actually didn't know was there.
Yeah,
So I think from what's gone on has then been a slight domino effect of then it's gone into lots of other things that she's really made me think about. And she also told me that, no, I used to kind of associate certain emotions with bad emotions. Some are bad, some are good. And she says to me, they're just emotions.
yeah,
They're not bad. Just because you're crying doesn't mean that that's a bad thing. That's what you need to do. So it's not no emotions are bad emotions. So she's definitely got me to think completely differently about, I think, a lot of things. And the same with you,
Yeah.
kind of being kind to yourself and not skipping the wins. So like the wins that you have, the positive things, talk about them, sit in them rather than, and this could be similar, like I feel that about my job, you might feel very similar that in my job it's like, oh yeah, you did that, right, let's move on to what you need to
Yeah.
work on though. So I think I've internalized that in myself. It's like, oh, I did quite good with that, but let's forget that because I really need to work on
Yeah, it's
this.
like you could have 10 great comments, but you always remember the
Oh,
bad one.
100%.
And I do think that that's just, unfortunately, the
Yeah.
culture and,
Yeah, of
like,
course it is.
environment that we live in. It's always like, "Okay, well, what's next?" I've done this, what's next now? How do I move on to the next bit? And I think probably in the last year or so, I'm trying to feel better about where I am now
Yeah,
and say, Do you know what? I'm happy with the progress that I've made. That doesn't mean that I don't want to make more progress,
of
but
course.
I am, happy to kind of sit here and go, I've come far and
You
I'm,
have.
yeah, I don't know if I'm quite, because I think 'cause for a lot of us, especially in work and stuff like that, I've always been super career driven. So I've always been like, what's my next role?
Yeah.
Get good in my current one, then what's next? And I think I'm at a bit of a phase at the moment where I'm not sure what's next, if I'm
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I want to do. I'm not sure what that looks like. I'm not sure if the next step for me is one that I want to commit myself to
Yeah.
in my current role anyway. I think it's like you kind of look at the next step and you go, what do you give up to get there?
Yeah.
And can I do the next step without giving a piece of me away that
Yeah.
I'm not happy to give
Yeah.
away? I still want to have time to do things like this and have
Yeah.
conversations like this. And I think you have to kind of go, well, okay, does that mean that you're comfortable where you are for a minute? And then
Yeah.
what does that address in your head about yourself? And make sure that you're not giving yourself a hard time for
Yeah,
being
definitely.
happy in what you're doing and, concentrating on some of the other things like moving house, getting
Yeah.
married, prioritizing yourself, um, investing time into passion projects and
Yeah.
things that you genuinely
I love.
care about and people and your friends and family rather than work, 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 work,
Yeah,
work.
definitely. I think on the flip side as well, I found that going to therapy, as well as actually giving me the tools to have a bit more confidence to push myself a little bit.
Yeah.
So, you know, things that may have happened a year, 2 years ago, I may have just gone, oh, well, I'll just stick it out. Whereas now I feel like, well, hang on a minute, I've managed to do this. I don't feel quite great about this. Would I usually just sit and go, "Yeah, okay." Now I'm like, I don't have to do that. I've got
Yeah.
the confidence. If I want to change it, I can. So I think it's like both. It's like learning to feel comfortable and happy with where you're at, and then getting in a good space to where you go, "No, I can push myself. I
Mm.
can. I can do that."
See, I think I always find super interesting because I think that just shows like how everybody is so different and how our makeups are just
Yeah.
different. Because I think I've always had that
Yeah, definitely.
ingrained in me where
To
I'm like, well, if I'm
push.
not happy, change it.
Yeah.
Like Jamie always say to me, like he always talks to people about like my career path and how I'm doing the kind of job that I'm doing at like such a young age and stuff like that. And it's genuinely because I've always looked at things where I've gone, what can I get out of it? Have I got everything out of it? Am I happy? Am I getting as much as I'm giving? If I'm not, off I trot
Yeah.
onto the next thing where I'm going to find
I love
value
that.
in.
If I'm not, off I trot.
Yeah, literally. And I've always, I've never kind of stayed at a company maybe for like more than four
Yeah.
years because I've reached in that particular company the limit of what I want to go to. And then I've gone to find different opportunities and what
Yeah.
that looks like for me. So I think I'm in a bit of a different phase where I'm like,
Yeah,
maybe just
definitely.
chill a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe just give yourself a little bit of time engaging with what you're kind of happy with. You're already in a great position. You're
Yeah.
already doing good things. Try and maybe find out what you want out of life a little bit more. And
Yeah.
that's a really big
It is a big
that's a
question.
really big question. I'm not sure I know the answer to that 100%.
Does
But
anybody?
no, and
Not
I think
sure.
it changes, right? Like what
Yeah,
you
of
want out
course
of
it does.
life changes all the time. I think for me at the moment, I've never really known long term what I wanted to
Yeah.
do. I think for you, you've had like you went to uni to be a teacher.
Yeah.
You've been a
Yeah.
teacher. You're doing that.
Yeah.
That's not to say that at some point you might decide that's not what you want to do, but definitely you've had like, I've got a goal. That's what I'm working towards. Bang. Whereas I've kind of gone,
What do I like? What
what
could
do
I
I like?
do?
What can I do? And
Definitely.
you fall into a lot of jobs and like certain areas. And I think now I'm going, I want to do things that I care about. And like, that's a big reason why I started the podcast with Laura, is just trying to help other people and trying to do stuff that you care about and that you want to try and make a bit of a difference. I don't know what
Yeah.
that looks like, but we've had some gorgeous messages in the last few weeks, some really sad ones as well, of like some really sad stories, but where they found that what we're doing is
Yeah.
helping
Help
them
him.
through some really hard times. And I think that kind of plays into a little bit more of what I genuinely care about, and investing time into this is where I'm getting a lot of that. I feel good about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And whereas previously it's always been where I've got paid, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
What kind of fills my bank balance to allow me to do stuff that I love and spend
Yeah.
time with people I love. And that's obviously still a big concentration of mine because I love nice holidays. I love
Yeah.
going away. Paula and I are going to Ibiza in August.
Can't wait.
It's going to cost us a bomb.
Yeah. Be
Um,
great. Memories.
yeah, memories. Um, Whereas now I'm like, no, I still will invest time into that, but there's other things that I care about and other things I want to invest time into.
Yeah, definitely. But like I said, for me, I feel like it's definitely given me the confidence to, if I want to explore new avenues, whereas maybe prior I would have not,
Yeah,
because
I
I've
think you would
been
have been a teacher for the rest of your life.
scared to do it. Now I feel a bit like I've done this, I've done this. Like, what are you waiting? What are you waiting for? What are you going to lose to try to do that or have a go or be involved in other things? You're going to lose nothing. So just do it. I
Yeah.
think for me that I've always had a bit of a fear um of maybe failure or not quite living up to how I should be or my potential.
Mm.
So not do it. Whereas now I'm like, no, that's not a reason. Just do it. Just do it and have a go.
I always think as well, like, whatever you put your mind to, you will smash, because that's just how
Yeah.
you are as a person. Like, if you put your mind to it, you'll do it.
Yeah.
But I think you've just found it hard to kind of go, I'm going to put my mind to that
Yeah.
because there's risks involved, or
Yeah.
people might not like
Yeah.
it, or I might not get the support that I thought I'd get. Whereas now it's like, life's a risk. You don't know. I think if anything, from all the conversations that we've had about grief and stuff like that, you genuinely don't know where life's going to
No.
take you, what's going to happen. So you've just got to live it as if it's your last
Yeah.
day and do things that are a little bit risky, you know, obviously not to get into the ins and outs of like from a relationship point of view, but there'll be a lot of people that are in relationships at the moment that are sticking it out, going, things will change, things will get better, which they may well do, by the way. Like, no one's saying that, but realistically, if you're not happy and things aren't going well and you're not feeling the best that you can do and things have been addressed but they're not changing, the bravest thing to do is to take the risk and kind of go, I'm not sure this is where I want to
Yeah.
be anymore. And that is so hard.
Yeah.
But realistically, that's how you get to your next steps in life,
Yeah.
where you're going to be happy, feel yourself. I think I sent you a meme the other day, or a
Probably.
thing, something.
I love
Paula
a meme.
Paula sends me like lovely like messages on Instagram literally several times a day, and I'm like, I need to be on your Instagram so I can send some of these back to you. I don't see these. But there was one the other day that says sometimes you've got to give up things in life that feel hard
Yeah.
to find
Yeah.
to have space and find space for the next
Yeah.
great and good things coming to you. And listen, that's not easy. And I think we've made it very clear, like even in this, like therapy's not easy.
No.
Addressing some of these things isn't easy. But I tell you what, it feels a lot easier when you've got a professional by your side talking you
Definitely.
through things step by step.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like people say, like, oh, do you not have your friends and family? Yeah, of
Of
course I
course
have
I
my friends
do.
and family. I talk to them about it as well. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But having that, like you're saying, and that validation from somebody who's trained, who's a professional, to turn around to you and say, you've been through a lot and you are getting there. It makes you think, I really haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah, getting there.
As well, I go to my therapist for a lot of validation. So sometimes I'll say, "This is going on. This is how I'm feeling. This is how I've started to address it, or how I think I'm going to address it. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
am I doing right by myself, or am I ignoring things?" I think sometimes I have a habit of maybe being one, like my mind is very black and white,
yeah.
and I don't do grey very well. So sometimes when I think I'm doing grey, I like to make sure I'm not doing charcoal grey, like nearly
Every shade
black,
of grey.
like a very slightly different shade of black, like a faded black or a off-white. I try
Yeah,
to go like, am I am I doing things?
yeah,
Am I thinking things through? Because sometimes my mind just doesn't allow me to see the other options. Like it's one extreme to another. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm just not going to do that now, or I'm going to do this, or I've committed to this now. So that's what I'm doing. And it's like, no, you can kind of go somewhere in between
whereas
if
I'm
you.
probably the opposite, whereas I think of every single tiny thing that then has to be like, "Okay, let's bring it back a little
That's it. But
bit."
everyone's brain's so
Yeah,
different, right? So I think that's great. Like you can go to your therapist and your therapist can say, I think we need to reel some of these in a little bit. And my
yeah, because she's like, "Whoa, you're all the way over there, and that's all the way over there, and you're actually here, so
Yeah.
bring it back."
Whereas I think, but that's similar to me, I think, where I'm going, well, I'm all in or I'm all out, or I'm all this or I'm all that. And she's going, well, you could just be this.
Yeah,
You could just do this. What
yeah.
about this? And I go, I don't think if I'd sat here for 10 years,
Would have
that
figured that
would
out.
have even come into my head.
Yeah,
Because listen, these are just the way that you're kind of made
yeah,
up through your experiences, like nature versus nurture, all those different things. And she helps me find the in between to give me different options that I don't think I ever would have come to. And even if my friends had suggested them, I don't think they hit home
no,
as hard as when a professional tells you, you don't have to do that.
yeah,
You don't
yeah,
have to do that thing. Like it's and listen, like I say, my therapist will say, "Do you think that's ego driven? Do
yeah,
you think it's because you think it will hurt how you feel about yourself or how people feel about you?" Yeah, it is. So then, how do I find positive ways to feed my ego without harming myself in the way? Like we would always talk about a lot of the things that I would do for my dad, and like what they say, there's no unselfish good deed,
indeed, yeah.
right? And a lot of what I
That
was
just reminds me of that episode of
the
Friends.
friends, damn it,
And she stings it, was it she stings
stings a
herself
bee,
with a
and then
bee?
they're like, but a bee dies. She's like, for God's sake. I love Phoebe. But yeah, like a lot of when I was supporting my dad and helping my dad, it's that part of you that wants to be the hero, that wants
Yeah,
to
of
save the
course.
day, that wants
Yeah,
to, I was finding validation in doing it, even though it wasn't necessarily working. And it was then going, well, how do I find this validation for myself without trying to fix everybody else in
yeah,
the way, and finding my validation through trying to fix other people's problems is not a positive
no.
way of doing it. So you've got to unpick things, find different ways of working. But yeah, I think, listen, there's all different types of therapy out there. I know people that have done CBT. um I know people that have done, oh my god, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the tapping.
I also think as well, just because you've done one therapy doesn't mean you and say it was like, well, I've done that and it was okay, but it didn't really work, doesn't
Yeah,
mean you shouldn't go and try another one. Because I
agreed.
think there's a big stigma of, well, I've tried therapy, and it's like, well, what therapy was it? Oh, well, it was that. Well, have you? No. well, you don't know then, it could be completely different and could open your
I
eyes
also
to
think your
to new
therapist
things.
as well, like anything, I'm sure there's some really crap therapists out there,
Yeah,
and there's the other end where there are some of the most incredible people that you'll ever meet. So, one of my friends has had like 4 or 5
yeah,
therapists and has been through different ones that have worked well, and at times that they've had a therapist that's had to change and say, "I'm going to a different country now. I'm doing this. I can't continue giving you therapy." And that's like a grief in itself. That nearly
yeah,
happened with me and Sue. She's going through a different time in her career where she's trying to cut down how much work she's doing. I mean, she eventually found time for me because I was like, who the hell am I going to
Please.
speak to? But that's difficult as well. But I think sometimes if you've been to a therapist and you've told them all your story, I get it. If I had to change therapists now, I'd be
Yeah,
like,
it's
oh my God,
hard.
I've got to start all over again. But actually, you might find that you end up unpicking stuff that you didn't unpick the first time
Yeah,
round. And it helps you just kind of, and listen, no one's saying that you've got to go into the ins and depths of every single bit. You talk about what
no.
you feels relevant,
Yeah,
and they'll get to the bottom of what it is anyway.
yeah,
They're very intelligent. They know how to ask the right questions. They know how to get into the crux of
yeah. Because
things.
like I said, I went into one thing and loads of shit came out of that one thing, so,
It's like a Russian
definitely,
doll. Like you open this,
literally,
like, and another, and
yeah,
another,
and
and
another, and
another, and
another, and
another.
another.
Um, but it's honestly, I can't recommend therapy enough. And I think, if my therapist wasn't fully booked, I've already would recommend her to
Yeah,
the nth degree. And I've got loads of people that have gone to see her over the years because she's just incredible. But yeah, she's fully booked, unfortunately, guys, so I can't recommend her. But
sorry.
um, yeah, the same for you. And I think now what's good is like if for whatever reason my therapist couldn't kind of work with me anymore, I could probably reach out to yours
Yeah,
and know that I'd have a good
yeah,
experience. All those sort of things. But I just think, you know, find someone that's going to give you what you need, but don't
definitely.
expect to hear what you want to hear all the time.
Yeah, because that's not gonna happen.
Nope.
But it will have a positive impact, so even in the time, and even like you said, hours after you might be upset about something, there will be positive aspects of it in
Oh,
the
yeah. Like I
end.
say, it changed my mindset. I feel a lot better about myself. My relationship's the best it's ever been. My relationship with my family and friends is like
I
worlds
feel the
apart
same.
from where it was. Like just everything you can think that needed to be improved, or maybe I didn't even know it could be improved, has been from going to therapy. So get yourself booked in, guys, is
Do
what
it.
I'd say.
I just say just try it.
Yeah.
Even if you're on the fence and you're not sure, just do it. Even if you do one session and then see how you feel.
Yeah.
Just do it.
And like Laura shared, she's actually going through obviously she's on maternity leave at the moment. So it's been her GP that's kind of referred her and gone through that. So if you financially are not capable to go privately, in terms of just you really can't afford to do it, and I understand for some people that genuinely is the
Yeah,
case,
100%.
do reach out to your
Yeah,
GP, do reach out to some charities as well. If you're really going through a hard time, there's people like the Samaritans and stuff like that who will talk to you, and check in with your work as well. A lot
yeah,
of works offer free mental health advice. I
yeah,
know for my work that you can, or you get like a couple of sessions like with a therapist, and they'll talk to you about stuff. So even if you're working for a company at the moment, it may well be the case that you're able to do that, and there's a lot of confidentiality in that as well. So your
yeah,
workplace um don't actually need to know. It's like an EAP, like a different helpline. So yeah, I hope that that's been useful. If you've been on the fence about doing therapy, take it from us, it is worth it. You won't go back
definitely.
on it.
No.
Certainly if you find the right therapist, and if you don't, keep looking. Don't give up on it.
Yeah, I
It's
agree.
it's the best investment you'll ever make into yourself. And yeah.
Do it.
Anyway, give us a follow on social media. Um, Give us a like or Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify. We're across them
Everywhere.
all. Everywhere you can think, we're on it. And we'd love to hear from you. And I think if any of you have got experience of being in therapy, and maybe it's not worked out as well for you. Share that, because I think it's always good
Yeah.
to have a different like perspective on things as well. But yeah, we'd love to hear from you, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, not me, but Laura will be back.
Yeah, well, and Laura's actually still away next week, but we've already
Oh, yeah, she is.
recorded an episode for Mother's Day, so that will be out next week, and then we may have a different face the week after, possibly, and then
Interesting.
back to Laura and I.
Lovely.
But yeah,
Thanks for
love
having
you.
me.
See you soon.
Bye.